before we start, do you actually, like, how much do you guys actually know about resumes?
Like, you show it to a company if you want to get hired.
Yeah. Have you guys built a resume? With it? What about you?
No,
You haven't? And what grade are you guys get in again?
we're in 11.
11th. Are you guys both in Oakton?
Yeah, no.
Colin?
Robinson.
Robinson? Okay, that's cool. Okay, so we'll talk about the resumes. I'll try and keep it as personal as possible. I don't want to read off screen like I said earlier. So before we start, I'll give an introduction to myself, and I'm sure you probably know a lot about me already, but I'll introduce myself to you. And then I've been here my whole life, grew up in Falls Church. I ended up going to Marshall High School. You guys probably know that school. I didn't do the IB diploma, but I did take a lot of IB classes. So I graduated IB. I think I did IB honors. And so I wrestled there, and I ended up going to William & Mary. Graduated in 2023 with a double major in finance and economics. And I think going to college, we didn't have this kind of support system we have now, in which we know the resources we have, and ultimately kind of like the big brother parent style, in which the older people give advice and whatnot. We didn't necessarily have that there. It was always available. It's just we weren't the system itself wasn't there. And so going to college, I had no idea what to do other than just go to college or go to classes, do well, and that's about it. But there's a lot more involved into it. You have to go to all these networking things. You have to learn how to, brand yourself, market yourself. Ultimately, know how to talk about yourself and who to talk to in order to get yourself into the best position for the next job. And so when I was in college, I kind of all I did was just go to class, get the good grades, that's it. But I had a mentor who was in finance already. I did the mentorship program through the finance academy we had at William & Mary. And he actually helped me out a lot because he was the one who showed me what a resume looks like, who to talk to, ultimately how to actually present yourself to these companies. And so without him, I wouldn't be where I am nowadays. And so I attribute a lot of my success to him. And so hopefully what we talk about today is what he told me, and I can help you guys out through your resume process. And so after graduating from William & Mary, I work at JP Morgan now in their finance division. I work in commercial banking, just think about loans, we keep it high level. And then after that, during college, after I got my return offer for my internship, I got pretty bored because full-time recruiting is a lot. And so when you already have that secured, you have a lot of free time. And with that free time, I was like, okay, what do I want to do with this? And I decided that, graduate school was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily know when I wanted to do it. And so through looking on Google and things like that, everything's on Google. You just got to take initiative. I found that they had these deferred MBA programs in which you get accepted, but then you get to defer your admittance 2 to 5 years out. And so that gives you time to work, save up money, figure out your life, things like that. So I applied to a bunch of programs. I ended up getting into Darden, which is UVA's business school. And so I'll be going there sometime in 2027, I think, hopefully. And, I have all these corporate jobs now, but I was in your shoes during high school. I literally cleaned toilets at Angelica Theaters. And, I was moving mulch bags and whatnot at Home Depot during college sophomore year. So I've been where you guys have been before. And yeah, I just know what it's like being in your shoes. But if you take it one step at a time, you're going to get to where you want to be. You just got to put in the work. So today, I guess we'll talk briefly about, what a resume is. I feel like you guys already have an understanding as to what it is, and then how to actually use a resume. And then from there on, how we can actually create a good resume for you. And there are some couple tips that my mentor gave me when I was creating my resume that really helped me out. So we can go about that as well. But Tangbo, what is a resume? Resume is pretty much just how you outline your professional experience and story to, recruiters and companies and whatnot. It's how you tell your story and who you are in a professional setting. It's not about I like X, Y, and Z. It's okay, I did X, Y, and Z. And personally, I went to this school, these are my credentials, etc. This is ultimately how you're able to market yourself. Be like, hey, this is what I've done in the past, and these are my talents, and this is why I think I'm the right fit for this job. So that's what a resume is. And you guys have examples. They're typically one page. You don't want to go over one. I actually had this intern coming in, and he has a 3-page resume with his picture as one page. And yeah, all the senior leaders have been talking about that. Not in a good way too. So you kind of want to keep it one page like this. Hopefully I've given you some examples because these kids, these are the resumes that they use to break into their own divisions. So we have finance, consulting, and tech. And yeah, but that's pretty much what a resume is. And then in terms of how to use a resume, it's just like an application form. Typically, like they'll like make you fill out a whole bunch of blanks or whatnot, but ultimately the resume is like the key thing that they look at. And so it summarizes everything, all your general info, your background info, things like that, into one page, and that's what they screen. And so HR recruiters are always looking at like a bunch. Like there's like thousands of resumes that they look at for this one job position. And so this is your application in a sense in like one page. And so you can apply for a lot of things with these things, such as, college, jobs, internships, scholarships, etc. And so ultimately you want to have a good resume because this is like your application form. This is how you're going to apply and actually hopefully get in or not. So these are some things that you can apply to. Um, just descriptions that you guys can read on your own because we'll share this presentation out. And then creating a resume. So I made this into a two-part. This is the first one, which ultimately the standard way of creating a resume, you figure out what you've done, then you figure out the right structure, and from there you just fill it out. And it's very important to keep editing as you go on because you're gonna do more and more things. But this is the one I kind of wanted to focus on. And so creating a resume, these are like the three main things I want to consider when I'm creating my own resume. The first one is, what am I actually trying to accomplish in the end? Like, do you guys know what you guys want to get into as of right now? Like, I know we've talked about your career. What about you?
No, not really.
And then, so I'm guessing, like college is something that you would want to consider though, right?
Yeah.
So in order to apply to college, some of these colleges require resumes. So it's like, okay, like where do I want to go to college? So if college is something that you're interested in, you want to get into, it's like, okay, so how do I act? So that's one of my end goals, getting into college. And then so from there, it's important to take mini steps. And I think that's what the resume is important about because it shows the progression you've made in your career into getting that end goal. Because ultimately, I compare it as like getting that desired job is similar to like completing that marathon, but you don't just run a marathon. You got to train up for it. You got to do that 5K and the 10K, half marathon, and finally the end goal is the marathon. And that's how you do it. I think of it the same way as a resume. It's like you go from the internship to the club, maybe back to the internship, and then finally progressing all these steps until you get to that full-time job. And so that's why I think taking those mini steps is important to that end goal because you don't want to just overwhelm yourself in one sitting. You want to take actionable items to get into that end goal. So if it's getting to law school, let's try and get that internship in that law field. Then you can get into, a better position from there on. And then finally, crafting the story. So many people have done the same thing. Like everyone in this room has done an internship. Everyone in this room has gotten a full-time job. Everyone's gone to school. But it's like the way you kind of craft it is very important because ultimately that's how you distinguish yourself from others. There's so many people doing the same things. So it's important for the resume to actually show a very unique and compelling story as to why they should take you. And then before we get into the tips, is there anything you guys are confused about? I feel like I don't want to keep rambling, but anything you guys have questions about right now? Hmm. Yeah.
Oh, put the computer on the chair. Like a format or like what it used to create the resume and just like literally do the top.
When you get to colleges, they typically give like all these clubs will have their own like resume infos and whatnot. Like I have one, I think, so I can share that after. But we just like copy and pasting like your own info into like the format that they give you. But like Google has everything as well. So you don't have to worry about that. Just gotta make sure you actually are putting in your own information. And then so the first resume tip that I learned from my mentor was in all these resumes, you have like 3 bullet points, 3 to 4, but mostly 3. And like there's like a lot of tasks that you do. However, ultimately you want to pick the ones that are relevant. And so for this, it's like I'm using an example, the Chipotle job. So like in terms of like if you're trying to put your Chipotle job on a resume, like which bullet point would you use in order to describe what you do? 1 or 2? 2? Why do you think 2?
It just sounds better, sounds like more important.
Yeah, because everyone knows like with a job like at Chipotle, like you're gonna be taking out the trash, and so that's kind of like a given. And so you want to make it as relevant as possible. Let's say like, because I worked at Home Depot, and when I was applying to like a finance job, I mean, I took out trash all the time, but I'm not going to say that on my like application. They already kind of know that. So it's like, all right, how can I describe the relevant skills for a finance job? So communication is really important. So I could have said like, oh, I took like these sales orders like every day, like things like that. So that makes it more relevant. And you have such limited space because you have that one page. You want to be able to put the right things in that are compelling and negative, because we know you took out trash at Chipotle, but we also know you did X other things. So that's why I think two is better. And so ultimately, that's the first step. You want to prioritize the relevant and make things relevant on your resume. And then Ngiba, going off what we said in the second slide, I think quantifying things is really important as well because it shows just how scalable you've done. So it's like, okay, so we know you took mobile orders. That was like the first thing we talked about versus taking trash, right? We know you took mobile orders, but how much? Because if you took one or two a day, it just really doesn't matter because it's like, okay, like this isn't really that scalable, but it's like if you've done like 500 orders on a day, that's kind of impressive. And so you want to be able to quantify things. And it just gives like a measure in which like the recruiter like, okay, like I know how much they did of this, and that to them is like a good sign. Because once again, there's so many people applying for the same position that you are. You just have to make sure you're as detailed as possible in the little space that you're allotted on the resume. And so I think that's why when you quantify actions, it just puts yourself in a better position than others because me and Jimmy could be working at Chipotle. I could have said like, oh, we both take mobile orders. But if he's saying it's like, oh, I took 50 and I said like, oh, I took a couple, I mean, chances are they're gonna go with Jimmy because it's like, okay, like he's actually demonstrating that he does something well and he does it a lot. So that's like the game changer right there. So we both did the same thing, but the way we communicated it with the recruiter was different. So it's like in this example, like which one would you go with, like one or two? You vote, right? You vote because it's saying like on average 50 to 75 mobile orders on every 8-hour shift. It's a lot more quantifiable than the first one. And then the last one, and this is kind of going in a chronological order. We went from prioritizing irrelevant and making our bullet points relevant to the position we're applying to. Then we quantified what we actually did. And then finally, this adds on, this is like the last resume tip, but it's showing the impact of what you did. I think that's like the most important thing because ultimately it shows how big of a role or impactful of a, you had on your role. And to recruiters, that's very important because they're always caring about that. It's important to show that like what you've done, but also to show like what effect that had on the external environment. And so like in that Chipotle job we're going off on, when you're taking mobile orders, I mean, me and Jimmy both had said like we're doing 50 mobile orders and that was it. But one of us actually showed the impact it had. It puts us in a lot better position. Like, okay, like this actually had positive impacts on like the company that they're working at. And so recruiters, when they see that, they're like, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want that person to be on my team because I know that at the end of the day, when they do their job, it's going to have X, Y, and Z impacts. And so these are just three like small tips that I heard from my mentor. And my mentor now works in HR. So he looks at thousands of like resumes a day. And these are like three of the tips that I found most helpful when distinguishing myself from other applicants. So the last one, it's like the first bullet point that we could have on our resume for a Chipotle job is prepped on average 50 to 75 mobile orders on every 8-hour shift, thus contributing to Chipotle's overall revenue accumulation. Basically, it's just a fancy way of saying, oh, I took this many orders and they gave the company money. Or you can say prepped on average, like the same thing. However, it resulted in a 20% increase in customer satisfaction. So between these two, we're gonna go with two because it shows that you took the mobile orders. This is how many I took on a daily basis. And because of doing this in an efficient and timely manner, it resulted in better customer satisfaction. The first one is kind of a given because if you're taking mobile orders, you're going to be taking people's money and thus the company's going to grow their revenue. So that's kind of a given. However, the second one shows the impact you've had on your own team and store. And it just sounds a lot better in the recruiter's eyes because it's showing that you had direct involvement in this field and whatnot. So does that make sense? So those three tips, I mean, it's like, if you have those on your resume for, I'd say each of your roles, it puts you in a really good position as to whether or not you'll get that opportunity. And I think a tip that I have that I didn't put up here, but we can just talk about is passive versus active roles. You guys are both in high school, so this is something you guys can do now and I'm sure we've talked about this, but being in high school, you can join clubs. Like, are you guys, like, what kind of clubs are you guys in right now? Or activities?
Yeah, I do try. I do drive right now.
Correct? You?
I don't think any right now.
Well, then if you join some, you probably can put that down on your resume. However, something that distinguishes like a candidate with a better chance of getting the same opportunity that you have is active versus passive role. So you can either be a passive member, which is fine, but when you're in like the same club with someone else who's applying for the same opportunity, but they have an active role, meaning there's like, oh, maybe they're on the operations team, or maybe they're just like, I don't know, on like the executive board, maybe they're like the CFO of the club, versus you, who's just like, oh, I'm just a member. It shows that someone has more time commitment to that role and someone's actually making an impact on that role. So when you're joining these clubs, like try and look for active roles. And this means that when you're just trying out all these new clubs, which you guys will in freshman year of college, it's one to like broaden your horizons a lot, try everything, but then from there slowly like figure out what you want to be involved in. And that's going to take a lot of time. So you're going to start minimizing the amount of activities you guys are involved in. Because on your resume, you're not going to have like 6,000 different clubs. Probably going to have like one or two with active roles. And to me, that's like a lot better than being like a member of like 8 clubs. Because being a member just means showing up. Having an active role means you're showing up and doing something, contributing something to like the team. So that's the one way that you can, get a head start on your resume right now because you guys are both in high school and I know there are clubs. And that's something that I didn't really do in high school. I was just a member. So looking back, I had wished like, oh, maybe I could have been the president of this club or this club, but I didn't really do that. And I started doing that in college, but hopefully you guys can take, action on that now before it's like not too late, but getting a head start never hurts. But yeah, and then this presentation hopefully has helped you guys figure out what a resume is, how you can use it, and how you can actually write one up in a very good and effective way. And so I know I'm your mentor, but you have my number and everything, but if you ever want to reach out, you can. I'm always here. I mean, still live at home, so I'm basically your guys' neighbor. But yeah, that's about it. I mean, reach out if you have any questions. I mean, I put my number and email here. You guys can always contact me. I'm pretty available with my schedule, but hopefully that helps. And Tiwa, yeah, we can make this open a conversation. We can involve the other members as well.
I think I have a couple comments. So this is like, when I look back when I was in like high school or like college days, I didn't realize how important this part is. The resume part is probably one of the most important aspects of your professional career, because I've seen so many people who are so smart at like computer science. I'm in the computer science field, right? They can code, they can do AI and everything, but their resume is so bad that companies will rather choose someone who has a better resume than someone who's smarter, right? And the only way you can really showcase how talented you are is through your resume. It's kind of like, hey, this is my first impression to the company and like what you have done. And then second, I think backtracking a little bit on resumes, like why do you need a resume? Like why is it important? Essentially, every job applicant, you're kind of in a competition, or like the company is choosing for one spot, and there's like 50 resumes. And so they're obviously going to choose the ones that are good resumes over bad ones, right? So that's why it's so important, because you guys are all fighting or like competing for that one job position. So that's why resume is important. And then the last bit is, I think what the tips that Norsang gave was really, really good. Like I didn't realize that until my senior year, how each bullet point you have to have actionable steps. Like what did you do is not only important, but like what happened afterwards. Why is it important? Oh, you took out the trash, or you did mobile delivery. Oh, what did that do? Like I've seen many resumes where people just say, I did mobile orders, or if there was a nurse, I took care of a patient. But what did that do to the patient? Did it increase their happiness? Did it increase their well-being? So adding those tips and bits in there makes sure that you have a good resume. And then the most important aspect, I think the most important part of the presentation that relevant to you guys is the mini steps. You guys don't have to have, like, when you look at this resume, it's all well crafted out, but that's years of progression. My first resume was so bad. Like, I applied for like 50 jobs and get, probably got one, but it was really bad. And my job postings were like, I know in mine you see like intern. But before that, it was like working at Safeway, working at Giant. And I, go on Google, look up Giant resume template as a cashier. And I'll kind of like modify the words a little bit. But essentially that's what you have to do. And then to tie it all together, think of it like basketball or sports, right? The sooner you start participating in clubs, the sooner you have like the sooner you start in like real game environment, if that makes sense. You can be practicing in your own soccer field or basketball court all by yourself doing drills. But that doesn't matter when it comes to game time, right? You have to have real game environment. So doing clubs and being an active role in the club is kind of like the real world situation when you come into the professional setting, where you have to make a positive impact to the club, and then the club is the company, and then your role is whatever in that club is. So I would urge you guys to really join like a club or two that you're passionate about, and try to be an active member, like Norsang says, so that you get that game, what's the word, like game experience. And then when you start working, you already like a head start. Yeah, that would be like my cons.
Yeah, like the reason why we're ultimately doing this for you guys is because when you go to college, you realize there's like an unfair playing advantage, and that's just life. But some people have been to schools in which they actively prep you for things like this, whereas other people, they went to other schools that kind of just the end goal was to get you to college. That's about it. And so as a community, we have all these resources, and so we want to give you what we wish we had at your age. That's what we're trying to do here. And the resume is just like the first step of the whole process, because ultimately the resume is what gets you in. Then you have the interviews and whatnot. That's your chance to like actually talk about yourself and differentiate yourself even more. So the resume, like that's the first step. Like I said, it's the first impression. That's why we want to really focus on it, because you only get one shot. Like the interview, like the recruiter will look at your resume once and that's it. And so when they're giving your resume that read, we want to make the probability of you getting the opportunity as high as possible. And like these resumes that I'm showing you, like yeah, that's years of like experience and like effort and whatnot. But ultimately, you can make your resume like tailored to anything. Like if you want to get a job at like you're working at Chick-fil-A, you want to get a job like another place, you can tell your resume like, all right, like I did X, Y, and Z at Chick-fil-A, and you'll get into like a better position. Once you have a couple part-time jobs, things like that, when you're in a club, then you can start applying for an internship. Like the resume I had in 2019, like when I graduated high school, if I used that to apply for like the job I have now, I would never have gotten it. But it's because I took those mini steps. It's like, okay, I'm gonna like I worked at Angelica Theaters, I worked at Home Depot, I'm in this club. I think with these experiences, I can get this internship. Okay, now that I got that internship, I think I can get this internship. You just build on that. So it's like you don't want to just go from A to Z. You want to go from A, B, C, D all the way to Z. Z being your end goal. And so it's like taking those mini steps is what's really important. And at your guys' age, I mean, having a part-time job in high school alone is like already putting yourself ahead of the curve, because some people go into college with no experience. They just join a club and that's it. Now you have a club and a part-time job on your resume. It's like interview, if you're recruiting for like an internship, they'll be like, all right, this kid actually knows how to communicate with like customers and clients, things like that. And no matter how little a role you've had or how like lowly you think of a job, which is like not important at all, because all jobs like are very important, is the way you present it ultimately. And so presentation is like very important, like that first impression. Like if I was in like my PJs right now, just talking to you, you guys didn't know me, I'm trying to give you resume advice. Chances are like that first impression would be terrible, because it's like, yo, why is this guy talking about resume experience? Like, doesn't really look like he's had any experience to begin with. Whereas if I came in this full suit, like I feel like that first impression would be a lot better, and you'd listen to what I'm saying a lot more. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like that resume is ultimately your first impression. So let's try and like make it as good of a first impression as possible, because ultimately we want to see you guys succeed, and the experience that you guys get, you'll probably learn more than us, and so you can continue that tradition of passing down that information. Because our parents, they didn't necessarily go through the same process. Most of them ended up in VOA or RFA, etc. So it's like they weren't able to give us this wisdom. Now, like since we've been through this, we can hopefully pass it on to you guys. That's about it, but are there any questions or anything you guys want to talk about? Anything you guys want to expand on? I'm totally fine, you guys.
Resume, the CV, what is the difference between resume and CV?
Resume is that's a good question. So the cover letter ultimately is like a qualitative way of like explaining your story. It's just you writing out an essay explaining like, okay, this is who I am, like this is what I've done, this is why I want to like work at this place or apply for this scholarship. Cover letter is just like a story, it's literally an essay almost. Whereas a resume, it's more so just like a condensed version of that with like bullet points instead of like full sentences. So
Not covered, CV,
CV?
curriculum wise.
CV is for like older professionals with like 10, 15, 20 plus years of experience. So those are usually more than one page. Like they can be like
Oh, yeah.
5, 10 pages or something. They have more information. Usually a lot of people in academia have CVs because they do a lot of research, publications. So it's for people with that. Resumes are more suited for us where we're still like early career professionals. We want to have like maybe 5 years of experience. Very like quick snapshot of what we've done so far. So that's like the main like LinkedIn, like
I mean, if you guys, you know, want to add to your resume too, like you can join Sherab Lamton Mentorship and find a role there to add stuff there, you know what I mean? Like just to get some started, at your guys' age.
yeah, or VTAG. I mean, I know VTAG is
Yeah.
like always looking for people, but it's important to be, like I said, that active role versus passive role because just being a member, like versus someone who's actually actively being like playing a team role or a key role on that team, just you don't really like stand up to them. Because it's like you got to compete against someone else at the end of the day to get that opportunity. So it's like put yourself in the best position. So don't just join to join. Like actually like join if you have interest. And then figure if you want to stay on or not, because there's also other opportunities. Like VTAC isn't the only thing. Like at school, like I know there's like Key Club or something. I don't know if that's what they call it anymore, but it's like a volunteering thing. If you have more interest there versus VTAC, like totally get it. But it's like if you're more active there, that's great. Like ultimately, like just find your own passion and interest, and then find a way to actively like contribute.
Another reason to like join these clubs and be an active member, like you're saying, or be a leader in these clubs, is because it helps develop your personality, right? So like the two things when you're applying a job is your resume, and then you get lucky enough to get an interview, they're gonna do like a behavioral interview. That's gonna basically they're gonna check your vibe, check your personality, check if you're fit for the position. So having those experiences of joining different clubs and not just being a member, but being like an active member or leader, even something like this, you can take a leadership role even like within Sherab Lamton if you want, or within your Tibetan school, whatever it is. They'll help build your experience and build your personality, which is equally as important as your resume. And then something you were saying about earlier, your end goal for your resume, and that can change depending on where you're applying to as well, right? Like you're saying. So for me, when I was graduating from college, I was applying to a bunch of different places, like Dashi was too. So if I was applying to like an IT auditing firm, my resume was fit to that IT auditing firm, depending on my experiences with IT auditing, whether it was like 1 chapter or 2 weeks in college, I put it all in there, right? So like, and then if I was applying to a consulting firm, everything I did related to that, I would, cater to that. Same thing for finance or tech or whatever I was applying to. So I had like 4 different resumes basically. So sometimes you might not only have one, you might have like 4 different versions of it, but still following the same principles there.
Yeah, and it's like I keep harping on the active versus passive, but it's like when you think of the Bulls, like winning those finals and whatnot, like you think of MJ, Scottie Pippen, like they had the active roles, but it's like, do you know who like the 10th man was on that team? I mean, they still won a ring, right? They're still like a member, but no one really knows their names and like what they did. Like MJ, and like everyone knows MJ. So it's like, do you want to be MJ? You want to be the 10th man? Yeah, that's about it.
I would just say, yeah, the resume can sound intimidating for you guys probably at your age, and if you don't have that much stuff, it can be hard to think of like what you want to put on. But that's exactly why Norsang Jr. is saying to join these clubs, like take on part-time jobs in high school. I remember when I started building my resume in high school, I didn't think that I had that much stuff. But then you look back on like every little thing you've done and all the clubs that I've joined over time, being an active member in different clubs, within school, outside of school, part-time jobs that I didn't think were like, didn't think could show for anything, but you realize that those things add up, and then you can just look back on, and then sometimes I remember thinking, I didn't really do that much stuff for these jobs or for this club or something, but then if you think about it, there's actually a lot of stuff that you can sort of like create and write on for your resume, and then, like Jamie's saying, the way that you tailor it to like a certain company or like whatever you're going for to use the resume for, it's literally like a game the way you write your resume. Like you modify it and change out like active verbs and everything, like you add in these little details and stuff. And it literally just becomes like, I remember when I was applying to jobs, it literally just became like a game at some point where I was like editing my resume in like certain ways, like using Google to use different like templates and stuff like that. And it ends up becoming like not fun. It's never really fun, but you just like become really good at it. And so like and again, it might sound a little bit intimidating even seeing the big resumes you guys have, but it'll start off really small and it's literally going to be a continuous like development. Like all of us are still going to have to keep working on our resumes. It's not like it stopped for us at some point. So just like take it step by step. Don't overcomplicate it or like overthink the starting stuff. Just take the steps that Norsang gave you, get involved, have stuff to put on your resume first, and then from there, just like take baby steps and it'll just like continuously get better and better. And then like, please use the resources that you have because there's a lot of them around. So just keep at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys are already on to a good start. I mean, you guys are already here and hearing this stuff. I think exposure early on is important. Like I heard all this resume stuff like in my freshman year of college. You guys aren't even in college. So yeah, don't get too stressed. You guys have like plenty of time to like learn and grow. Just want to give you like exposure now so that like when you guys hear about it later on, you guys aren't like, yo, what is this? You know, you guys aren't surprised. Man, that's about it. It's beautiful outside. So thank you guys for showing up. And then yeah, we'll share this presentation, like so that way you guys don't have to like forget everything.
And if you guys ever want to build resumes or just start, you can always like reach out to us.
Yeah, like we had plenty of people